Hello and welcome back everyone. I'd like to share a little exercise with you today that in the beginning of my own journey was extremely helpful. You know, when we go out and we do talks and we do seminars and workshops, one of the most asked questions is, how did you learn to channel? How did you learn to communicate with your guides? Well, we have a simple little exercise that I'd like to share with you. That, who knows, it might make it possible that you start to communicate with your guides and that you start to learn to channel and work with your guides. Okay, now think of a question that you'd like to have an answer to. Something in your life that you'd like to find out where it might be going or just an answer to. Think of a question. I'm just going to use a simple example here. Let's say I'm going to meet a nice guy, or am I going to meet a nice woman? Am I going to join up with a beautiful companion, or something like that? Just a simple question. And I mean, you've got to really think about this, and you've got to be thinking about your own questions, but it's about the question. And the way we do this is actually, just imagine now that this space between my hands is where I'm placing the question. For instance, am I going to meet a nice, beautiful woman that's on the same level as I am in her spiritual development? Well, that's a beautiful question. It's quite a long question. But my hands at the moment are symbolizing that we've actually had the start of the question here, and we've had the ending of the question there. Now the clue here is that while you're making the statement, while you're verbalizing the question, what's going to happen is somewhere in here you're going to feel a yes or a no. Actually, it's quite comical when you do this, because sometimes even just before you, or just as soon as you start to ask the question, you've already got your yes or the no. But just be alert at what's happening, because it's really important that you do have your yes or no answer before you finish stating your question. Why? Because if you get your answer outside of your stating your question, generally what you'll find is that this is your own self wanting to place the answer there, or it's your own ego that wants to place the answer there. So, think of a question, write it down. That's a great way to do this. Write it down, because your questions become more clear to you when you're able to write them down. And you have to be very clear when you're starting to do this. Because sometimes you're going to be asking the question, you're not going to be feeling anything, so you're not getting any answer at all. Now, there are several possible reasons for this. One of them, of course, it could be that you're not in clarity, that you're not clear enough with your question. So, write it down and go look at it, or try to find a different way of stating your question. Try to use different words. And if it then works, great. If it still doesn't work, well, there's another possibility. It's quite possible that they're not going to be answering your question because you are the one that are here as the creator being. And it depends on your choices, it depends on your actions, whether you actually will indeed meet that person. Now, this is just a short example, and at a certain point, we're going to actually be making a video that's going to be a lot longer than this, with a much more in-depth explanation to be able to take you through this with a lot of different little exercises. And eventually we're going to be placing that. Just allow us the time to be able to create it. For now, you have a little exercise that you can use, and while you're practicing it, while you're playing with it, there's something beautiful going to happen as well, because at a certain point, once you practice this enough times and you've got your yes or no answers enough times, something kind of sneaky happens. And this is really cool, because this is exactly what happened to me. All of a sudden, I realized that I was just sat there and I was having a conversation with my guides. And I hadn't realized, but I'd been doing it for some time. So you see, I hope that this little exercise leads to the same way for you to be able to communicate with your guides. And as if they're sat across from each other, you are sat across from your guides, and that you're actually having a full-blown conversation with them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little ritual, and thank you for listening. Namaste.